Hey guys, so this is kind of just an impromptu video that I wanted to do about my procedure that I had. It's been 5 weeks, tomorrow, 5 weeks tomorrow. The main reason I wanted to do this video is because when I was researching before I had the procedure, people's experiences with this, I keep saying the word procedure, with this heart ablation, I haven't found anyone that's had any of the same symptoms that I had in the recovery process. So I wanted to get my experience out there so that if anybody else has the same experience that I've had, that they will, number one, not feel alone, and just so they can know somebody else has dealt with it too. So I'll go back a little bit. What I had was called a catheter heart ablation. The reason you have that procedure is for, well, you can have it for many reasons, but it's for irregular rhythms of your heart. And I have suffered from heart palpitations for years. I can't tell you how long, but a long time. They've gotten worse in the past 2 years. That I had to, 2 years ago, January, it was in January 2 years ago, so 2.5 years ago, my heart started going extremely fast, like in the hundreds, like 110 to 120, and it was constant. So I went to the doctor and they put me on a heart medicine, and that heart medicine slowed my rate down to in the 70s. I felt better, because my heart rate was lower. It did cause me to gain almost 20 pounds over the 2.5 years that I took it. So that was a down whatever, a bad side effect. So anyway, that's not why I ended up having the procedure done. Over the past couple months, I've been having episodes where my heart I would have like a palpitation, and normally I could cough or something because I could feel it in my throat, but normally I would be able to cough and it would correct itself. But here the past couple months, or about a couple months before the procedure, it wouldn't correct itself. It was like it was just flopping in my chest for a while, and it was miserable. So I went to my cardiologist, and he's an electrophysiologist, I think that's what you call him. And he wanted to put a monitor on me for a month, but then he said since it was irregular, I didn't have it all the time, he suggested that I purchase the AliveCor monitor for myself because I would always have it. And it's basically an EKG that works with your phone, and that I would record whenever I had an episode, and I would just print out the recordings and send him to his office, and he would read them for me, and we would go from there. So I decided to order the monitor because the episodes were getting worse. 2 days after I received the monitor, Aaron and I had decided to take just like this little overnight trip, a couple of hours up the road, just to get away. And that night at the hotel, my heart went into that rhythm where it was flopping, but it just wouldn't stop. So I got the monitor out and I recorded it, and my heart was over 200 beats a minute. And it was the worst feeling I've ever felt in my life. And it corrected itself. It went back, it came back down, but it stayed in the 90s. It wouldn't come back down to the 70s the way the medicine had been keeping me. So but I kept getting irregular readings on my monitor. It kept saying possible AFib. So since I was in a different town and I didn't even know where the hospital was, I called my doctor's office. This was like 4 or 5 in the morning, and they told me to go to the local ER because if I was an AFib, they needed to monitor me. So I did. I went to the ER and they hooked me up, and at that point I was not in AFib. I was very tachycardic, whatever the word is. My beats were in the 120s. But I showed them the rhythm on my phone of what was going on, and they were shocked. They said that they didn't even really know what it was. Contacted my regular doctor, they did, and they put me on a different medicine. Well, a medicine in addition to what I was already taking, to try to prevent another episode before I could get in to see him. So finally, I get in to see him. It's like a week later. I didn't have another episode, thankfully. Although the medicine they put me on made me feel awful. The medicine in addition to what I was taking, it was called flecainide. If you've ever taken it, you probably know how awful you feel. So I went in to my cardiologist, and it was a week later. It was on a Friday. And I showed him my strip from what had happened that night for the printout from the heart monitor. And he said it's not AFib. He said, but it is an SVT, which is supraventricular tachycardia. But there are several different kinds. And he said, I can't tell you what kind this is. He said, just looking at this, but I can tell you that it's an SVT. And he said my recommendation would be an ablation to prevent this from happening again. And that was on a Friday, and I was like, okay. He said, okay, we'll do it Tuesday. So 3 days. Wait, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 4 days. So he told me that night I had to stop all my heart medicine, the new one plus the other one that I had been on for 2 years. And I was scheduled for the ablation on Tuesday, and I was terrified. And I had looked up so much stuff on YouTube and on the internet, and I'd read really good things about the ablation and about, just it being really low risk, and everyone's outcomes were wonderful. So that's kind of why I wanted to make my video, because I'm not out of the recovery period yet, but I don't have the great feelings that everyone else has had. So anyway, I'll just explain. I went in, and the ablation, I was awake during the ablation. They give you something to make you sleepy. I think it was a mixture of Demerol, Versed, and fentanyl, I think is what they gave me. And I felt really relaxed, but I knew everything that was going on. I could feel, they run wires from your groin, your main veins in your groins, and they did both sides of mine. They run wires up into your heart, and then they send like electricity through those wires to try to recreate the rhythm that they need to get rid of. And my cardiologist said most likely it's a muscle that is in there, and that sometimes my heart will start looping in that muscle. It's the best way he could describe it for me, and that causes the irregular rhythm. And what they do is they try to recreate the rhythm and then burn that muscle so that it no longer can have that connection, and you won't have the irregular rhythm. So I felt all of it. I felt him, the medicine he was putting in to speed my heart up or whatever. But as soon as he got in there, I went into the rhythm. So he said my heart was very sensitive. He was able to find everything, and he made all the ablations, the burns or cuts or whatever that he felt he needed to make that would prevent my rhythm from ever coming back. Actually, at the end, he kept trying to recreate the rhythm, and it wouldn't It felt awful while he was doing it, but it wouldn't sustain the rhythm. He was having to cause the rhythm. So after the procedure, which the procedure itself wasn't bad. Like if you ever are told you need to have an ablation, there was nothing to it. I mean, literally the worst part was the IV in my arm for the, just for fluid. I mean, and my medicine. The actual ablation, you just feel your heart in an irregular rhythm and you're just laying there, and it's, when they go to burn it, I kind of jerked, my body jerked, and I couldn't control that, but it wasn't bad as far as the procedure itself. So after the procedure, I had to stay in the hospital overnight. And he said whenever he was finished that he felt it was a 98% success rate, 2% chance that the muscle reconnects over years and the arrhythmia would come back. But he said that he would need to put me on a medicine to keep my heart rate slowed down, because what he called my natural pacemaker was very fast, and he didn't do anything with that. That's just the way my heart ran. So he was going to have me on a medicine to keep my rate slower. So when I got out of the hospital, I was put on the medicine, and my rate was very low. It was like in the low 50s, and my blood pressure was very low. And so I called them, and they told me to stop the medicine. And so I did. And when I stopped the medicine, I expected for my heart rate to go back up. I was expecting it to go maybe in the 70s, which is where the previous medicine kept me. When I wasn't having the irregular rhythm, I was in the 70s. That's where I expected my heart rate to stay after the ablation. But it hasn't. It's been a month now, and I can look at my watch. My heart rate right now is 52. I'm not on any medication. I have talked to my doctor, and we have done tests. He tested because I have a lot of shortness of breath, and my guess is because my heart rate's so low, my body's not used to it. I feel like I can't breathe. So he did a chest x-ray, a lung perfusion scan. He was checking for blood clots. All that was good. I wore a Holter monitor for 24 hours, and it came back that my rhythm was slow, but the lowest it got was 47. And it didn't sustain at it didn't stay 47. It was just, that's the lowest it got. And the highest it got was like 115. And another thing, my main problem that I'm having is my heart rate is staying so low. Now, for some people, 52 may not feel low. But for someone who has never run under 70, or 75 really, it's a big adjustment. And I'm hoping that my body adjusts to it, if this is my new normal, and that I will be able to feel like I can breathe normal. I don't know if you can even hear it in my voice, but I feel so out of breath, and my heart rate's only 52. But something else that I'm dealing with that I pray goes away is sitting here. I am 52 beats a minute. But if I get up and I walk just a few steps to the bathroom, my heart rate will go up into the 120s instantly. And then as soon as I'm still, it drops back into the low 50s. And this happens suddenly. It isn't like most people whose heart rate gets elevated and then it comes down gradually. Mine will go from 120 to 50 in 2 seconds. I've watched it on the monitor. When that happens, the only way I can explain it is it feels like all the blood is being drained from my head down. And I kind of feel like I'm going to pass out, but not every time it happens. Some of the times I feel like I'm going to pass out. So he told me, my cardiologist, the one who did the ablation, that he doesn't know why my heart is as slow as it is. But he says that people come into his office begging for numbers like I have in the low 50s. He said anything between 50 and 90 is good, and the lower the better. So we're hoping that my body will just adjust to this lower number and I will stop feeling so bad. As far as the dramatic fluctuations, he said there is a risk of fainting with that. So I just need to be careful and give myself time for my heart rate to drop. Like if, for example, if I was doing something, I started feeling lightheaded or whatever, make sure I was able to sit down when my heart rate drops, which is it's impossible to do because I never know when it's going to do it. Sometimes it does it when I'm moving around, but then sometimes if I'm nervous or I get anxious or whatever, I'll be sitting here and it'll hit 120 and then it'll drop down to 50 and then it'll hit 120 and it'll drop to 50. And it does it consistently, like over a minute of the monitor. If you do a minute long recording, I go from 50 to 120 so many times in a 1 minute process. And it's exhausting. He said that he thinks that the drops and the increases, that erratic rate like that, the rate changes, will over time go away. He said that those are most likely and hopefully just where my heart is still healing and irritated. He said it takes 3 months, sometimes up to 6 months for your heart to fully heal from an ablation, and I am only at 5 weeks. But he says he doesn't think that the rate, my resting rate as far as the low 50s, is going to increase. He feels that whatever he did when he ablated that muscle, he said something that maybe my heart was almost in a constant state of tachycardia, and the metoprolol was what I was on, that it was keeping me at 70, but once I would stop the metoprolol, it would come back up, and that this muscle that he ablated stopped that altogether, so that my new normal may be always in the 50s, which, like I said, according to him is good, but it doesn't feel good, and the fluctuations don't feel good. So that's really my story about the ablation and what I've experienced so far. Like I said, I mainly wanted to record my experience so that other people out there, when they search for cardiac ablation or SVT ablation, that they can see that this is something that can happen, because I never saw a video about it where it drops your rate so much. Most people say that their rate had increased after the ablation, but they didn't have their irregular rhythm anymore. And I no longer have my regular rhythm. Like I said, it's been 5 weeks and I have not had one episode of SVT, and that's wonderful. It feels wonderful to not feel palpitations and racing and those awful feelings that comes with an SVT. But this doesn't feel good either. Do I regret it right now? Yes. Because the SVT was not something I had every day, all day. This low heart rate is every day, all day. And these irregular rhythms are 90% of the day, if I do anything. So I was going to look, my rhythm right now is 51. So if it doesn't get better, and like I said, I'm only 5 weeks out, but if it doesn't improve, yes, I regret having it done. But my prayers are that my body will adjust to this low rate and it'll just be a new normal for me. And then it would probably feel good to not race and feel my heart pounding in my head and things like that I used to experience. It would feel, this would be nice if I didn't feel so short of breath. And sometimes I just feel like someone's just wrapping this really tight band like around my top of my chest and my throat, and it's always when my rate is low. And it's been down, like if I'm just sitting and watching TV and I'm not talking or anything, I'm just sitting there watching TV, it's dropped to 46. It doesn't stay there, but it does go that low. So anyway, that's my story of my SVT ablation, and I would appreciate prayers for healing from my heart, hoping that healing includes this rate up and down so quickly that would stop. And it'd really be nice if my heart rate would go up into at least the 60s. I feel like I would feel better if I was a little bit higher than what I am now. My post-procedure appointment's not till August the 30th, and that's 3 months from when I had the procedure, because like I said, it takes that long for the heart to heal. So I'm just praying that between here and August 30th that these fluctuations stop and that my heart rate comes up. And I didn't want to get emotional through this video, but apparently I am. Because I guess my biggest fear with this is that after I first got it done, it was in the 70s and 80s. And then a few weeks after that, or a couple weeks after that, not a few weeks, it's only been 5 weeks. Probably a week after I was running in the 70s and 80s and I felt okay, it started running in the 60s for about a week. And then after that, it started running in the 50s. So over the past 5 weeks, it's just going slower and slower and slower. And now we're in the low 50s. And sometimes high 40s. And I told my husband that I'm afraid that it's just going to keep going so slower and slower and slower until it stops. And that's just me being raw and real and how I feel, because it's tough when you feel like you can't breathe. And you've done everything that you can with the doctors, You've had all the tests. And the doctor tells you that the low 50s are okay and everything is okay. But I'm just scared of it continuing to go down. Plus, I don't feel good anyway at the rate that it's at. So that's my SVT story, and if you all would pray for me, specifically for what I've asked, for my rate to come up a little bit and for the fluctuations to slow down, I would really appreciate it. So thanks for watching, and if you have been through an ablation and you have experienced the same symptoms that I'm having, I would love for you to comment below, so that I'll know maybe there's one other person out there that isn't alone, who experienced a dramatic drop in their resting heart rate, or just in their heart rate in general. It's not resting. I can do something, like I said, and it goes up, but then it drops right back down to the low 50s. So if anybody else has been there and been through what I've been through and had the same outcome, I'd love to talk to you. I really would. So I guess that's it, and I thank you for watching, and I thank you in advance for your prayers.